Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. My estimate is we have about 2 weeks before the fireworks start in Washington. About 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. The legal team of the president is going to resist Mueller's attempts to subpoena the president, to interview the president, to bring the president before a grand jury, and on and on and on. And it's overdue, but there's skilled lawyers now on either side, and Mueller has gone way, way beyond the mandate that was given him that had to do with Russian involvement in an election. He's interviewing all kinds of people about things that were not relevant to it, payments to Stormy Daniels and stuff like that, not relevant. And we understand that other members of the team are being added to the legal team that the president has available to him. And Rudy Giuliani looks like he's taking the lead now away from Jay Sekulow, who was running things and almost by himself. So, but anyhow, members of the president's legal team, Rudy Giuliani said the president might talk to Mueller, but no way. There's no way there would be, if you looked at some of the questions that were leaked to the New York Times, the whole thing is a trap. And Mueller is trying to trap the president into saying something that's inconsistent with something he may have said 2 or 3 months ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And on the strength of that to say, well, you have an intent, you had an intent to do this, that, and the other. But I want to say flat out, a president cannot obstruct justice when he talks to members of his subordinates. And the Attorney General reports to the president, and so do the Rosensteins of this world and all the others. They're all part of the executive team, and the president does not obstruct justice when he talks to them about cases, nor does he obstruct justice if he pardons somebody with his pardoning power. The Constitution gives the president broad authority, and the idea of limiting it by these special prosecutors is just insane. So we can't have that. Well, Terry, what do you have? Well,
Giuliani says that the president might be investigated or speak to Mueller in all of this, but he wants to lay out some ground rules first. Heather Sells has that story for us.
Special counsel Robert Mueller is warning the president that he could compel him to testify before a grand jury. But one of the president's lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, says no, Mueller's work has not been objective and he does not have the power to subpoena.
I think they lost that power. This is a completely tainted investigation.
Giuliani told Bloomberg the Trump team would be inclined to do an interview if they thought it would be fair and limited in scope. The interview could go into Trump's firing of former FBI Director James Comey. Giuliani said that if the Mueller team believes Comey is telling the truth, an interview would just be like going into a lion's den. And he said the idea that Comey is telling the truth is a joke, because in Giuliani's words, Comey hasn't told the truth in years. As for issuing a subpoena to the president, the Supreme Court has never ruled definitively on that question. And Trump has just hired Emmett Flood, a veteran lawyer, for the investigation. Flood represented former President Bill Clinton during his impeachment process and has defended former Vice President Dick Cheney. He's known for his aggressive advocacy and may take a more adversarial approach to Mueller. The president, of course, is already doing that, tweeting on Wednesday, "There was no collusion and there is no obstruction of justice." Meanwhile, a big change in the story about the president and porn star Stormy Daniels. Giuliani says the president repaid his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, for a $130,000 payment to Daniels.
He didn't know about the specifics of it, as far as I know, but he did know about the general arrangement.
It's something the president has denied.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
This morning, the president tweeted that the payment came from a monthly retainer and that campaign money was not used. He said it was intended to stop Daniels from the false accusations made by her about an affair. The bigger concern for the president right now, a Mueller investigation that's lasted close to a year with no end in sight. Former Trump campaign aide Michael Caputo told ABC News he believes Democrats are trying to draw the investigation out and hope to destroy the president, his family, and his businesses. Heather Sells, CBN News.
No question, the deep state is trying to take the president out of office. That's what it's all about. And this Rosenstein, to me, I would have fired him on day one and fired him the week after, and the week after, and the week after. He's stonewalling Congress now, and Congress says, look, we've got a legitimate need as an investigative body. You ask us to put up the money, we appropriate the money, we have to investigate what's being done with our money. And they have an absolute right to do it, and Rosenstein will not give the money, claims the Justice Department is somehow sacrosanct. Well, that's just nonsense. And I think that man should have been fired a long time ago. And the fact that he appointed a special counsel, he would have known, well, he would have known that this would be crippling the president of the United States for years. And he did that deliberately. And of course, when the Attorney General recused himself from all these hearings, he left the president naked without the help that he needs, and turned everything over to Rosenstein. I mean, the whole thing is outrageous. And it's shown clearly from emails that the FBI, key figures in the FBI were plotting ways to keep President, at least the candidate Trump, from winning the election. And to think that that's an impartial body is just insane, and to think that Comey tells the truth is just ludicrous. He's lied repeatedly, and we're dealing with a flawed agency now that needs to be brought under control, and I hope that Trey Gowdy and some of these congressmen will do what they have to do. And there was some report, well, we won't have another special counsel investigating the Justice Department, but something needs to be done to bring them to heel. And there's some thought that Rosenstein would be impeached by Congress. But anyhow, it's a mess. And but it's caused by what was known as the deep state. These career politicians who do not like Donald Trump and want to keep him from power, and they want to get him out. Well, there's no way it's going to happen. And in any event, in other news, today is a day our country sorely needs. It's a National Day of Prayer. Ephraim Graham has that.
Pat, millions will recognize this year's National Day of Prayer across the country, building up to the main event taking place tonight inside the U.S. Capitol. Abigail Robertson brings us more on the leaders gathered in Washington for this decades-old tradition.
This year marks the 67th observance of the National Day of Prayer, and the theme is Unity in America, which Pastor Ronnie Floyd says could not be more fitting for this particular moment in history.
We live in a time that is so divided. Polarization is really at an all-time high. And as followers of Christ, I mean, if we're Jesus followers, we need to lead the way in doing everything we can of walking in unity together.
Floyd maintains politics will not heal us and government will not fix us, and that only a massive prayer movement can bring healing to our land.
We're calling all of America to pray for America.
Floyd will lead the prayers for unity tonight inside the Capitol, alongside leaders like Priscilla Shirer, Congressman Mark Walker, and Dr. James Dobson.
If there ever was a time when this nation needed prayer, it's now.
Pastor Frank and Sherry Pomeroy of Sutherland Springs, Texas, will be special guests at the event. They will talk about the power of prayer after a shooter walked into their church last November, killing 26 people, including their 14-year-old daughter.
Pastor Frank is going to lead us in prayer for the churches and the schools and the public settings all across America, that God would put a shield of protection around us. It will be a powerful, powerful moment.
And President Trump will again host faith leaders in the Rose Garden to recognize the day's significance.
I think he's serious about it. Some people will say it's a political ploy of some sort. I know him. And I don't believe it. I think it's in his heart.
Floyd hopes the president adds something extra, such as last year's dedication to protecting religious liberty in America.
I'm sure, knowing the president, there will be something that will forward, what will help us to go forward in our nation about those matters that most believers are concerned about in life today.
Floyd says if unity is to come in our country, it must begin with Christians crying out to God and proclaiming the gospel of Jesus. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
And Pastor Floyd is right. The president is adding something extra. He will sign an executive order today to create a new White House faith-based initiative. It will work to protect religious freedom and to help faith-based groups work with the federal government. And we also have this important note as well. CBN's David Brody will be interviewing Vice President Mike Pence today. You can see that interview on tomorrow's 700 Club. The legacy of Billy Graham lives on in a number of ways, including his son, Franklin Graham, who's written a new book sharing lessons he learned from his father. Our John Jessup sat down with this famous son to discuss that book and his take on cultural issues and division in America, including inside the church.
Franklin Graham last took the stage at his father's funeral when the world listened as he proclaimed the gospel.
To God be the glory.
There was some discussion not long ago about the evangelical movement and where the evangelical movement goes now that Billy Graham is gone. You know, I don't know. I'm not an evangelical leader. I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep preaching the gospel, keep giving an invitation for lost people to put their faith and trust in Christ.
Now, 2 months later, Graham shares even more about the man remembered as America's pastor in the book Through My Father's Eyes.
You hear the question asked often, who's the next Billy Graham?
My father answered that question. He said, I've been asked who's the next Billy Graham, and there are about 8,000 evangelists out there. And my father looked at them and he put his hands out. He said, you are the next Billy Graham. All of us who preach and proclaim the gospel. I guess the question for some people, who's the next celebrity evangelist? I have no clue. And my father never wanted to be a celebrity. And maybe that's why God used him.
Franklin wants others to follow his singular focus of winning souls for Christ. He leads by example through the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and his humanitarian aid group, Samaritan's Purse. In addition to showing compassion, he also sees the need for confrontation, especially in what he calls today's anti-Christian culture. That ranges from GQ magazine mocking the Bible to a comedian's crass jokes at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
I want Christians not to be seduced by this culture in which we're living and not to be led astray. And I think there needs to be a voice that speaks out, because there are not many people that speak out.
From the dysfunction to the division across America and even in the church, he sees only one key to turning things around.
We have to pray. Prayer can change. Prayer can move mountains. It can drain swamps.
Prayer, he says, became his father's main ministry in the final years, something he now says is missing.
And now that my father is gone, I feel like there's an exposure. I don't have, it's not a mantle, but it's like an armor. A little bit of that armor is missing. And so it makes me have to pray even harder. The prayer burden is shifted to me as it relates to my family. And I think my father, for the last 10 years, he was the prayer warrior in the family.
Simple yet powerful prayers from a father that changed a family and changed the world. John Jessup, CBN News, New York.
And Pat, prayer is a ministry every believer can have.
Well, this program you're watching was called the Program of Prayer and Praise. We first started out, CBN has been built on prayer. We have had prayer meetings, prayer summits, prayer times. We've been praying for the nation and the nations of the world for decades, and there's no other way to win except by asking God's anointing and His favor.